Caught his eye too. This time Violet didn't flinch when Asher ran his fingers through her hair. His touch was gentle, almost like a massage, and she nearly melted. She shouldn't be getting comfortable with Asher, the mind control psycho, but there was something vulnerable about the moment that drew her in. Don't get it? Asher whispered, his eyes intense. You're my rebellion. What? My future, he corrected. Our futures are all mapped out, but you, my chosen one, will be the wrench in the gears. You'll tear them all apart and, maybe then, rip out my bleeding heart. How poetic is that? He laughed, the sound bordering on manic. Violet pulled away, uneasy. Almost immediately, the office door opened, and Violet's heart leaped. Principal Jameson? But it wasn't. Instead, a young girl in a Lenaris Academy uniform entered, pushing a cart. Alpha Asher, the girl said, bowing her head, waiting for instructions. What's going on? Violet frowned. Asher glanced at his watch, a slight frown creasing his forehead. You might be late for your first class, but don't worry, I'll handle it. My purple queen needs to eat first. What? Violet blurted out, totally confused. Before she could wrap her head around it, the girl started setting out food on the small table in Principal Jameson's office. All done, Asher, the girl chirped, practically beaming as if serving him was a huge deal. Asher barely glanced at her, just shoot her away with a wave of his hand. Then his intense eyes locked onto Violet. Well, eat. You think I'd let you roam around campus starving after that breakfast fiasco? Violet froze. He knew about that? While her first instinct was to refuse, her stomach rumbled. Okay, fine, she was hungry. Just this once, she let it slide. She looked down at the table and her jaw dropped. Goosebumps erupted all over her skin. The food was exactly what she ordered that morning, down to the last detail, even the drink. This was way beyond creepy. This was full-blown stalker territory. Violet scarfed down her food, not because it was amazing, but because she wanted to get away from Asher. He totally misread her, though. My poor queen, you must be starving. Let me order more, he said, already grabbing his phone. No, Violet blurted out. Asher raised an eyebrow, surprised. No? I'm good. Seriously, any more and I'll puke, she said, which was true. Years of not having enough to eat had shrunk her stomach, and she was stuffed. Asher frowned. You eat like a bird, little purple. Not enough. But don't worry, I'll fix that. A shiver ran down Violet's spine. Nope, not happening. She was already plotting her next escape. There was no way she was letting the psycho turn her into his purple queen. Violet forced herself to slow down, taking smaller bites, trying to look normal. Asher was busy with his phone, which gave her a second to breathe. She couldn't help but check him out, though. He looked surprisingly normal in his school. Normal. Asher was busy with his phone, which gave her a second to breathe. She couldn't help but check him out, though. He looked surprisingly normal in his school uniform. Unlike Roman and Griffin, Asher's uniform was like something out of a magazine. She wondered if he was like a straight-A student. Or was that just another act? Was anything about him real? Violet got so caught up in trying to figure him out that she barely noticed she was still eating. There was something about him, though. Something that drew her in. Was it his hair, all styled perfectly to the side? Or his flawless skin? How could anyone look that perfect? As he typed on his phone, a little frown appeared on his face, and Violet had this crazy urge to smooth it away. Okay, I'm officially losing it. Or maybe Asher was like making her think he was attractive. It sounded insane, but with Asher, anything was possible. Violet glanced up, and her eyes locked with his. She choked, food going down the wrong pipe. She started coughing like crazy, tears in her eyes. Here, Asher said, shoving a glass of water at her. Violet didn't even hesitate, just chugged it until it was empty. Asher put the glass down and started rubbing her back. You're okay, I got you, he murmured, his hands moving in soothing circles. Violet stopped coughing, but was frozen, staring at Asher. No one had ever said those words to her before. Even in this messed up situation, no one had ever taken care of her like this. Maybe Nancy had, but only when Violet was sick, and Nancy didn't want her to die. No one else had ever acted like she actually mattered. Violet was lost in the moment as Asher cupped her face with one hand, still rubbing her back with the other. His touch was softer now, almost seductive. Her breath caught in her throat. Violet couldn't fight the strange vibe. As Asher leaned in, her eyes fluttered closed. It's just a kiss, she told herself. Nothing more. But just as their lips were about to touch, the door swung open. Who the heck is in my office? Principal Jameson's voice boomed, then trailed off as she took in the scene. Violet jerked back, mortified. Being caught almost kissing a psycho felt like a slap in the face. It snapped her back to reality. Mr. Nightshade! Oh, shoot! Principal Jameson cursed, realizing he wasn't wearing his sunglasses. Violet used the distraction to scramble away from Asher, getting to her feet just as Principal Jameson pulled a pair of aviators from her bag and put them on. Violet couldn't help but wonder what the big deal was about looking into Asher's eyes. They were unusual, yeah, but that was it. She felt weirdly comfortable looking into those slitted, reptilian eyes. Unless Principal Jameson had secrets she didn't want Asher to uncover. Unlike Principal Jameson, Violet had no secrets, except her plans to escape tonight. Oh, Principal Jameson finally seemed to recognize her. Miss Purple. Even with her eyes hidden behind the shades, Violet could feel the judgment radiating from Principal Jameson. It wasn't surprising, considering her creative application. Violet grabbed her bag. I'm leaving for class. Asher stood up. I'll walk you. No, Violet blurted out, startling both Principal Jameson and Asher. She took a breath, forcing herself to speak calmly. I think you've done enough already. It wasn't a thank you. If Asher walked her to class, it would cause a total scene. She didn't want that kind of attention. Before coming to Principal Jameson's office, Violet had checked her ranking, and was shocked to see she'd climbed to 18th place. If the people she'd bumped down were anything like Paige, she was in for a world of hurt. Even though it wasn't her fault. She didn't even want this. Who was pushing her up the ranks? Whoever it was, they were going to get a piece of her mind. For a second, it looked like Asher might ignore her, but surprisingly, he backed down. Thank goodness, Violet thought. She'd rather deal with Asher's obsession in private. It was already too much to handle. Principal Jameson, however, realized what Violet's leaving meant. She'd be alone with Asher. Oh, crap. She shot Violet a desperate look, silently begging her to stay. But Violet just grinned knowingly. Have a nice day, ma'am, she said, and walked out. Principal Jameson gulped, turning back to Asher, who was now scowling. Just when he'd been getting somewhere with Violet, she had to barge in and ruin the moment. There you are! Someone suddenly jumped in front of her, startling Violet out of her thoughts. Ah! Violet screamed, instinctively punching the person in the face. She froze, horrified, as she realized it was Alice. Alice yelped, clutching her cheek. Ow! Violet rushed forward, frantic. Oh my god, Alice! I'm so sorry. I'm okay. Alice insisted, trying to wave it off. See? No damage. She attempted a smile, but winced. But dang, girl, that wasn't mean, right, Puck? Violet took a deep breath, her racing heart slowing. Then her worry morphed into anger. What the heck is wrong with you? Why would you jump out like that? Are you trying to get yourself killed? Alice rubbed her cheek, pouting. You should be asking why you just punch people in the face. What if it wasn't me? What if it was someone innocent? She added, her pout deepening. Well, where I come from, there's no such thing as a small prank, Violet said, emphasizing the words with air quotes. And it teaches people not to mess with me. Alice's pout intensified, her eyes welling up. You're so mean. If I'm so mean, then leave me alone, Violet retorted. At first, Alice's constant tagging along had been kind of cute, but now it was just getting on her nerves. Violet preferred to keep to herself. You couldn't trust anyone. There were no friends, only people wanting to stab you in the back. This crazy school wasn't exactly a breeding ground for BFFs either. Deep down, a part of Violet she refused to acknowledge even to herself knew Alice was slowly chipping away at her walls. But that couldn't happen. No way. Not gonna happen, Alice said defiantly, making Violet jump. For a second, she thought Alice had actually read her mind. What? I know you're trying to push me away, but it's not going to work. We're going to be great friends. I can see it. Alice declared with such certainty that Violet frowned. What was with this girl? Was she psychic or something? What am I even thinking? Alice declared with such certainty that Violet frowned. What was with this girl? Was she psychic or something? What am I even thinking? Alice chirped. So, I saw your schedule and we have the same classes. Come on, let's go. We're already late. Without waiting for a response, Alice grabbed Violet's hand and practically dragged her down the hallway. Come through, she yelled, weaving through the crowded corridor, forcing other students to dive out of their way. Oh, that lunatic, Violet muttered, but she couldn't do anything except let Alice drag her along. They stopped in front of a classroom door. Alice flung it open and pulled them both inside before Violet could even blink. The class was already in session, though the teacher wasn't there yet. Violet thought she was lucky. If only she'd known better. The second they walked in, everyone stared. Just as Violet expected, the whispers started. If being the first freshman at Lunaris to break the top 20 hadn't made her famous, then her epic cafeteria brawl definitely had. As expected at Lunaris, the classroom was huge and fancy. The AC was blasting, and they even had a smartboard. It was way beyond anything Violet had ever seen. Most of the kids were humans, but there were a few werewolves too. Violet was relieved to see that none of the Cardinal Alphas were in this class. Chin up, he picked a seat in the back, trying to blend in. But Alice followed her like a lost puppy, bumping into desks as she tried to squeeze in next to Violet. Violet gave up on trying to ditch Alice, figuring she'd get bored eventually. Hopefully. The whispers continued, with kids sneaking glances at her, but Violet ignored them. Soon their anthropology teacher walked in. Mr. Harrison was tall and serious-looking, with intense silver eye. He carried a coffee mug in one hand and a tablet in the other. He paused, looking over the class before walking to his desk. Alice leaned over and whispered, "They say Harrison is a racist jerk who loves werewolves and practically worships them. Good thing Karma gave him a human form, unlike his sibling." Before Violet could process that little piece of information, Mr. Harrison was already at the board. Without a word, he wrote the day's topic in big, clear letters on the smartboard. Werewolf, the true origin of humanity. Violet's eyebrows shot up, but she quickly hid her surprise. Unlike some of the human students who guessed, Mr. Harrison turned, his face full of disgust, as he looked at the humans sitting among the werewolves. He walked forward and asked, "Can anyone tell me about the theory of evolution? Or, in simple terms, how did humans come to be?" No one moved. It was obviously a trick question. "Why isn't anyone speaking?" Mr. Harrison asked, his voice dripping with fake disappointment. "Just loud enough for everyone to hear," he muttered. "Humans. Always so cowardly. And you wonder why werewolves shouldn't rule the world." No kidding. Alice hadn't been exaggerating. Mr. Harrison was a total bigot. Harrison sighed dramatically, as if teaching were a prison sentence. Fine. First 5 hands up, get 5 points each." Violet instantly understood the importance of these points, when almost every hand shot up, including several werewolves and Alice's. "Alice?" Violet shot her a confused look. "What?" Alice frowned. "I need points if I'm going to protect you." "I don't need your..." Violet began, but other students were already answering. "According to the Bible, God created everything. On day 6, he made Adam and Eve, the first people," one student said. "Amen." Harrison clasped his hands together mockingly. 5 points. Next." He pointed to another student. "Charles Darwin's theory says species change over time. Creatures with good traits survive and have babies, passing on those traits. This leads to slow changes," the student answered. "Excellent. 5 points. Next." Harrison picked 3 more students, none of them Alice, leaving her visibly annoyed. Harrison clapped his hands. "You all answered right," he said, "and stupidly at the same time." The excitement drained from the students' faces. They hadn't seen that coming. Humans weren't the beginning of evolution. Werewolves were. In Violet's entire life, she'd never heard anyone spout so much nonsense as this man was spewing. Had Harrison taken something before class? Was that what was in his coffee? And yeah, a Lunaris teacher would probably be capable of it. After all, teacher-student relationships were supposedly encouraged here, so taking something shouldn't make any difference. Harrison went on and on about how werewolves weren't just the first inhabitants of Earth, but also the true predecessors of human evolution. He practically spat the word evolution, like it was some dumb myth humans clung to. Violet noticed the werewolf students didn't seem bothered by this propaganda. If anything, they looked smug. Of course, the teacher was on their side. Why wouldn't they like it? This was straight-up discrimination, and Violet could feel the tension among the human students. Harrison himself was oblivious to the unease in the room, which felt like a mix of gasoline and a lit match. He continued. Students. Harrison himself was oblivious to the unease in the room, which felt like a mix of gasoline and a lit match. He continued. The concept of human evolution, as you know it, is made up. Pure-blooded werewolves were the first beings, blessed with strength, resilience, and intelligence. Humans came later as an offshoot, weaker and less capable. A human student at the back couldn't take it anymore and raised his hand. And what is it? Harrison asked. Dion. How can I help you, Dion? Harrison asked, his lips a thin line. He didn't appreciate the interruption. Is this even in our curriculum? Dion asked. The whole class burst out laughing, including Violet. She wasn't a robot, after all. She'd been waiting for someone to call the teacher out. And now that Dion had mocked his lecture, she was pleased. Unfortunately, Harrison looked like someone had just spit in his face. His expression was scary. For a moment, Violet pictured Harrison murdering Dion for his audacity. Harrison started walking toward Dion, and with each step, it felt like he was sucking the air out of the room. He finally stopped in front of Dion, and Violet had to give Dion credit. He didn't flinch. He stood tall. Harrison's expression was ice cold. This class, Dion, isn't for speculative debate. It's a study of werewolf heritage, culture, and legacy. One that's deeply rooted, in fact, even if some humans would prefer to believe otherwise. He glanced around the room, daring anyone else to challenge him. And the fact that you asked that question means you haven't studied properly or you intended to rile me on purpose. He finished with, 10 points from you. Man, Dion groaned. It was just a question, sir. Another 10 points deducted, Harrison declared. Dion slumped back in his seat, sulking. While Mr. Harrison turned to leave, Violet turned to Alice. Can points be transferred? Obviously. How do you think you've been climbing up the ranks so quickly? Oh. The realization hit Violet. Initially, she wanted to compensate Dion for standing up for what he believed in. But a slightly devious thought crept into her mind. What if she transferred all her points away? You know, like philanthropists give away their wealth. That would be like contributing to society. Or in this case, Lunaris, right? But Alice seemed to catch on instinctively, shooting her a warning look as if she read her mind. Don't even think about it. Violet smiled sheepishly, but the idea had already taken root. Is there a problem here, Miss Violet? Oh, shoot. Violet swallowed when she looked up to see Mr. Harrison, standing right in front of her. Judging by his arched eyebrow and cold stare, she bet he'd overheard her talking about transferring points to Dion, and assumed she was challenging his authority. No, sir. The automatic response was on Violet's lips, but then her expression furrowed. Screw it. She wasn't going to let this man bully her like the others. Actually, sir, I do have a problem, and it's with your theory. Mr. Harrison was taken aback, clearly not expecting that. Even her classmates straightened up, tension filling the room. Violet swore she saw someone pulling out their phone. And what exactly is the problem, Violet? His words dripped with sarcasm. Violet did not doubt that Harrison knew about her circumstances at Lunaris and didn't approve. In his mind, she probably wasn't worthy enough for Alpha Asher. If only he knew she didn't want his attention either. Violet cut straight to the point. If werewolves were truly the pioneers of evolution, then why didn't they dominate the Earth like humans? Humans have always been resilient, adaptable creatures capable of extraordinary feats. From my perspective, it seems more plausible that, at some point, a human might have surpassed their natural limits and developed the ability to shift into wolves. Through reproduction, that trait could have been passed on, spreading the gene responsible for it. She continued. Or maybe the moon goddess decided to bless some random human for a noble act, giving rise to werewolves. But let's be real, if neither of those scenarios fits, I bet my money they were cooked up in some lab experiment gone wrong. Her words hung in the air, bold and unapologetic. For a moment, the classroom was drenched in stunned silence. The tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Then Furry contorted Harrison's face, his features darkening with rage. As if that wasn't enough, snarls and snapping jaws sounded around her. Violet's stomach churned as she realized the noise was coming from her werewolf classmates. Violet gulped, her bravado fading fast. In a rush to challenge Mr. Harrison's story, she'd accidentally ticked off not just him, but like a whole race of werewolves. They looked ready to jump out of their chairs and rip her apart, their eyes burning with fury. If it weren't for the other kids in the room, Violet was pretty sure they would have shredded her right there. Great, just great. Make enemies with an entire species. Just what she needed. Mr. Harrison docked Violet 100 points for her blatant disrespect of werewolves. Violet wasn't even fazed. She checked her ranking. The deduction was a drop in the bucket. But then it hit her. Had she been played by the principal? Principal Jameson had supposedly taken 500 points from Griffin for attacking her. But now Violet realized Griffin probably hadn't even noticed. Not with his massive point total. Principal Jameson had probably just done it to shut her up, like a parent pretending to punish a spoiled brat. What the heck? The woman had fooled her, and the realization made Violet's blood boil. She clenched her fists, wanting to confront Jameson right then and there. But she couldn't focus on that now. She had bigger problems. She'd just made enemies with the entire werewolf population, with no clue whether she had any protection from their revenge. Violet had bigger problems. She'd just made enemies with the entire werewolf population, with no clue whether she had any protection from their revenge. Violet decided not to risk it. The second the bell rang, she bolted. She didn't stop for anything or anyone. She focused on putting as much space as possible between herself and potential werewolf wrath. Hey, wait up! Someone yelled. Violet glanced back and saw Dion running after her. Hey, Dion said, breathing hard as he caught up. Hey, Violet replied, just as Alice popped up beside her. Seriously, this girl wouldn't give her a second of peace. Dion turned to Violet. I wanted to thank you for back there, sticking up for me. Though, you might want to dial back the sarcasm a bit. Werewolves are sensitive about their heritage. Whoa, hold on. Violet shot back. I didn't do that for you. Your situation might have kicked things off, but that racist jerk had it coming. Besides, she added, dripping with sarcasm. Werewolves can dish it out, but they can't take it. I'm just saying, don't provoke the wrong people or make them think you're prejudiced against werewolves. Basically, be careful around here, Dion advised. Don't worry, Alice chirped, throwing her arm around Violet like they were BFFs. I'll keep an eye on her and make sure she stays out of trouble. She was really committed to this self-appointed bodyguard gig. Good. Dion smiled warmly at them. And you know what? Come have lunch with us, Alice offered, not missing a beat. Alice! Violet's voice was sharp. What? We're just making friends. There's no we here. This is all you. And if I remember right, you told me the top 20 don't hang out with the lower ranks. Yeah, they don't hang out with them, but they can invite them, Alice said, completely unbothered. What the? Violet sputtered, confused. What's the difference? She threw her hands up in exasperation. What was with these people? Alice plowed on, undeterred. The difference is they can't eat with you, but you can give them a taste of what it's like to eat with the elites. A taste that tons of people crave. A taste that tastes like ashes. Violet interrupted. Done with you guys. It was nice meeting you, Dion, but I'm off to my next class. She turned and walked away, relieved that Alice didn't have the same class. Otherwise, she'd lose it. Meet you during PE! Alice shouted after her, but Violet ignored her. Violet was kind of naive and thought the werewolves had just let her comments fly. No. She walked through the halls to her next class. Every werewolf she passed gave her low growls and dirty looks. Their eyes were full of menace, and it hit Violet that news had spread like wildfire. It felt like walking through a minefield, all those glares and growls, reminding her that these guys were predators. It made the hair on her arms stand up. Even with all the hostility, nobody did anything. There was no physical confrontation, no open challenge, no line they wouldn't cross. Violet liked to think she had some kind of immunity, and not that some alpha was protecting her. Thinking about that, Violet finally found her advanced biology classroom and went inside. The room was buzzing with chatter as students talked with their friends. Only a few people even noticed her, and they didn't pay her much attention. It felt great not to be stared at like she was from another planet. The students here were serious about their studies. Seats were filling up fast. Violet spotted an empty one near our window and hurried over to grab it before anyone else could. Little did she know, nobody ever sat there. Violet wasn't alone, though. A student was already sitting next to her, his head down on the desk, right by the window. He must be a werewolf, Violet thought. She noticed his ears twitch when she sat down. Then he lifted his head. Violet forgot how to breathe. It was him, Alaric, the Cardinal Alpha of the North. The same Alpha she'd met in the infirmary when she got patched up. The one with the lightning powers. Violet couldn't look away, totally captivated by his electric blue eyes. She could almost see lightning dancing in their wild, powerful, and untamed eyes. Even the air around them seemed to crackle with energy. She'd never felt an intense attraction to anyone before, which is probably why it stung so much when Alaric narrowed his eyes and broke their gaze. Without a word, he turned toward the window and went back to sleep. Violet tried not to let his coldness bother her, but she couldn't shake the hollow feeling in her chest. Blood clotting or coagulation is the process where blood changes from a liquid to a gel, forming a clot to help stop bleeding. It's also called hemostasis, and its steps are vascular spasm, platelet plug formation, and the coagulation cascade. The teacher turned on, totally unaware that Violet's mind was miles away. Violet had always been a science student. She thought it was fascinating. If there was one thing she was looking forward to at Lunaris, it was the advanced classes and awesome labs. Right now, they are studying how human and werewolf blood clotting works. But Violet had stopped taking notes on her smartphone a while ago. It was all because of the werewolf sitting next to her. Alaric Storm was still asleep. And even though it shouldn't have bothered her, it did. Not just because he was missing a lecture, but because he was so ridiculously good-looking. Violet couldn't count how many times she'd start writing notes, then look over and find herself staring at his face, her heart suddenly pounding. And just like that, whatever the teacher was saying would go in one ear and out the other. Finally, Violet gave up. She'd just study later in her dorm. Her attention was totally focused on Alaric now. She found herself watching. Finally, Violet gave up. She'd just study later in her dorm. Her attention was totally focused on Alaric now. She found herself watching him sleep, which she knew was kind of creepy. The teacher hadn't even said anything to Alaric, even when she noticed him sleeping. Violet wondered if it was because he was a Cardinal Alpha, or if she was just used to him sleeping in class, or maybe both. Why was he sleeping in class, though? Did he just not care because he was like the king of school? Or was he up all night? Now that she was looking closer, she could almost swear she saw dark circles under his eyes. Was he not sleeping well? Trying to figure him out, Violet didn't realize how close she'd got. She was practically peering at him like a kid with a new toy, trying to figure out how it worked. People said Alaric was the quietest of the Cardinal Alphas, and Violet could see that. There was this innocent, peaceful vibe about him. And it was almost like she could feel it too, calming her down, which was weird. A breeze from the window blew a piece of his curly hair over his face, and Violet's eyes locked onto it. Her hand was practically itching to move it. She must seriously have a thing for hair. Oh, whatever. Violet reached out to tuck the hair away, but before her fingers even touched his forehead, a hand shot out and grabbed hers. A little gasp escaped her lips. Alaric was awake. He was staring at her like she'd completely lost it. That's when Violet noticed he was wearing a glove, and she stared back at him, shocked. She saw something that looked like a vein of lightning go through his head. Wait a second. Could it be? At the same time, his eyes flashed with ice-cold anger. I'd suggest you keep your hands to yourself from now on. Violet's face burned. She mumbled a quick sorry and stared straight ahead. For the rest of the class, she didn't hear a word the teacher said. Her mind was crazy, and all she could do was kick herself for being so dumb. It was obvious now that Alaric had problems controlling his powers. That must be why he kept to himself, so he wouldn't hurt anyone. And she practically tried to poke him. Violet knew she had a self-destructive streak, and this just proved it. But even so, she couldn't help but feel bad for him. These powers weren't supposed to be in hers. Had the moon goddess even thought about that before giving them to him? Violet snapped back to attention when the teacher mentioned something about pairing up with your seat partner for an experiment. They were supposed to compare human and werewolf blood clotting times, using mixed plasma samples. Great. She was on her own then. Soon enough, the samples were passed around, with pairs already working on their experiments. Violet sat by herself, Alaric Storm having turned away to continue sleeping. Someone sure loved their sleep. The key difference between werewolf and human blood clotting was that werewolf blood clotted faster. This helped them heal quickly from injuries, whether they were in human or wolf form. Ferrocene, the key ingredient in the experiment, was a rare mineral used in control studies to compare clotting rates across species. When exposed to ferrocene, werewolf blood clots almost twice as fast as human flesh. Violet had to follow the textbook carefully, since she hadn't been paying attention. She grabbed the ferrocene vial and worked independently, since her partner was out cold. She wondered how the teacher would grade this, since Alaric hadn't done anything. Halfway through, just as Violet was about to add the ferrocene, Alaric grabbed her hand. Before she could react, he'd taken the vial, poured some out, and added it to the sample. Why did you? Violet started, but the icy glare he shot her made her shut up and focus on the experiment. They stayed quiet for a few minutes, watching the clotting indicator. The reaction had reached the required result. Just then, the biology teacher, who'd been watching them, came over. She looked at their work, a proud expression on her face. Great work as usual, Alaric Storm, she praised. Wait, what? Violet couldn't believe her ears. Did he just take all the credit? Sure, he added the correct amount of ferrocene, which she couldn't deny since her measurements were wrong. And judging by the failed experiments around them, he had saved her. But still, she'd done all the work. The teacher didn't. Precise measurements were critical. Too much ferrocene can mess up werewolf blood clotting, slowing it down instead of speeding it up. Good work, Alaric. You knew that rule and must have guided your lab partner, didn't you? Alaric looked at Violet, and for the first time she wondered why she'd ever thought he was innocent. He was a total wolf in sheep's clothing. He said with a fake smile, Of course I did. Violet must be so grateful. Violet was too angry to even care that he knew her name. Good. The teacher clapped her hands, clearly pleased. It's great to know you have a lab partner you can tolerate. I'm sure you two will make a great team. At that, Alaric turned to Violet, studying her with an unreadable expression. Well, he drawled, color me excited.